Okay, so we're now on the development machine that we're going to be using to do this work. And what I have here is I have the Xbox Console Companion, which is the app that you can download absolutely from the App Store. And that's actually already downloaded and I have it running here. Be careful because there is another Xbox app and that's different. That's related to Game Pass and things like that. So this is not the Xbox app. This is actually the Xbox Console Companion. And then once you have that Console Companion, you can go down here to connection. You click on that. And then if you don't already have your Xbox added, you can click Add Device. When you click Add Device, it's going to actually show all the Xboxes that are in your network. So as you can see, I have an Xbox called Road Dog in my network. And then when you select that and click Connect, it'll actually connect to that Xbox. You can also go directly to the Xbox that you're trying to connect to. In this case, I'm trying to connect to this Xbox One that I have. And once you're in there, you'll actually have an option to basically stream it. As a matter of fact, let me do that with the other one because this Xbox One is the one that we are using. And if you recall, the issue with the one that we are using is that it is actually now in dev mode. So from the perspective of the entire Xbox services, that Xbox is actually off. The sandbox we're in is a completely different Xbox than the live Xbox that we can use to play games and things of that nature. So I'm going to add device. I'm going to go to Mr. Road Dog over here and I am going to connect to it. And there you go. It's relatively straightforward. As you can see, you can connect to multiple devices at one time. It doesn't just have to be one. So in here, I can actually go in here and I can say stream. And what's going to do is it's actually going to start connecting to the Xbox and then put you in there. And right now we're connected to this guy, but we can't really do anything here because I don't have any controllers connected to it. But this actually is live. You know, this is actually the Xbox that is running there, complete with the apps that are there and things of that nature. So I'm going to stop streaming. That's the process of connecting to the Xbox. Once you're in there, you can then go into the Xbox itself and enable or disable whatever you need to enable. Again, once you've got it into dev mode, you're really not going to be able to do this anymore. So this is only just for a little while in order to get to that point. This is not a full screen sharing solution. Uh, and the Xbox does not see itself as one specific device. In this sense, it sees itself as multiple devices, right? Each one is its own sandbox, its own environment, and that's basically how that runs. So now that we've done that, why don't we go ahead and open up Visual Studio and we will actually connect to the dev activation mode Xbox that we previously set up. But let's go ahead and let's create it. So once you're ready to go, basically you select C#, Windows, UWP. That's what we're doing. I'm going to be building this using C#. This is a Windows application and the technology is UWP. Make no mistakes, an Xbox is a Windows device. It's just using Windows as a platform for basically building a gaming platform that you then write games for. So we're following suit and we're going to be building a blank Windows application to start for this Xbox. So let's click next. And I'm going to put it in the scratch pad. And let's call it controller precision training, because I guess this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be building something that can be used to test your speed of moving the controller around. Click on create and just leave it as is and just click OK. Okay, so that is done. And we should now have a fully functioning Windows application. Let's go in here, and we're just gonna add a little bit of text just so there is something to look at when we deploy it. Okay, and let's go ahead and make it larger and center it. So horizontal alignment center, vertical alignment center, font size 30. Let's go with 50. Okay, and that's it, we're done. And we just build it locally and run it locally so we can see it working, first of all, to ensure that everything is working as it should. Okay, so now that that is loaded, we should be all set. And as you can see, the application starts. Let's just freak it a little bit and add a little bit more to that. I'm gonna add a run here. One orange, save that. And there we go, right? So hello Xbox One, relatively simple. And that basically gets the application running. So next, we will now basically connect this to the Xbox so that we can deploy this very same application that we created onto the Xbox, and it should essentially run the same. Doing this is relatively straightforward as well. Again, most of what we're going to be talking about here is pretty straightforward. So you just right click and go to your project properties. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be showing debugging, right? So that's how we're going to do that deployment, is basically when you go through and debug, which is run the code and have the code live while you're running it so that it can hit breakpoints in your code where you can inspect the data and see what's happening to help ensure that what you've written, that the assumptions that you have match up to what's actually happening when you execute it. It's very important for building high quality applications. And this is the pattern that's used essentially for deploying to the Xbox, right? Once you have specified a target device here in this section over here, then even if I just right clicked and said deploy, it will actually deploy to that target device, right? So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using, normally it says local machine. That's what it said up to this point. That's why it ran on this machine. But now that it says remote machine, it's actually going to deploy to a remote machine. And in this case, that remote machine is the Xbox. Notice that there's also Windows 10X, which is something that might be coming. And honestly, I don't know what this device piece is and what that's about. So let's go over here to remote machine. We'll click on find, and then we'll enter that IP address that we talked about, which was 10.0.0.237. And we'll keep the authentication mode as a universal encryption. And then let's go ahead and let's run this. So what should you see? What you should see now is um, something coming up, which is going to prompt us for the pin from Visual Studio that we want to use. Okay, so now as you can see, what's happening is that now that we're connected there, it's asking for a Visual Studio pin. And you guys saw how we were able to basically on the dev app screen, on the main screen for the dev app on your actual Xbox, it had a button there for basically specifying the Visual Studio pin, for generating a pin. I'm going to show my pin so I make sure that I'm using the right one. 8BK. This is that pin. Once you generate it, you basically need to go into Visual Studio, and when you attempt to connect to it, it's going to ask for that pin and use that pin to create the connection. So once you enter your pin, and make sure, of course, that the target environment that you're deploying to is x64. and also ensure that you are using the universal Windows protocol, which is what will actually prompt for the screen to be popped up in the first place, for the pen screen to be popped up in the first place. You should be all set. Deploying is literally a matter at that point in time of just right clicking and saying deploy, or obviously clicking the debug button. So right now what we're going to do, now that we have basically everything set up properly, we're using the universal unencrypted protocol. We are using x64 and we have the IP address. We've set up the pin so that it's trusted with, so that Visual Studio is trusted with the Xbox device. And we're basically all set and ready to go. We're actually not going to remote debug right now. What we're going to do is simply just right click and just say deploy. Right. So right clicking and saying deploy should now deploy this app onto the Xbox, so that when we look at the Xbox, we should see the controller precision training app icon there. Of course, the app icon is just going to be just a square with an X through it, but with the title underneath it. But it's a good point for us to say, okay, we've actually deployed, and then go on to the next part of this. So we are now back on the Xbox, and we're looking at the same home screen that we were looking at before. Again, settings, this factory fitness app that we previously created, App Store. Again, once you deploy to your Xbox, like any other app that you add to your Xbox, it's not actually going to end up getting pinned to your home screen, because this, of course, is your home screen. In order to do that, you actually have to go in. So go into My Apps and Games, go to Apps, and right there, you can sort of see it there. It says Controller Precision. This is actually the app that we just created. So we can actually select that. And hold on. So to run your applications, so now that we see that the application is there, Controller Precision, the next step is setting the application up so it can be run. No application, or none of the consumer grade applications, I should say, can run on your Xbox if you're not signed in, right? It actually won't work if you're not signed in when you're using this preview or developer, program mode. So you actually need an account to be set up on your Xbox for it to actually work. In which case here, I'm just using my own personal account. In case you want to friend me on Xbox, it's Synergy. Once you have that set up, once you're signed in, you can actually go into your app and actually run it. To do that, we simply just click on it, boom, and that's it. Right now I have this Xbox running on a dark theme. So because it's running on a dark theme, when I actually open the application, the colors are flipped, right? So the orange is still orange because I explicitly said that, but the text is all white and the background is now black, right? So as a final step now, what we're gonna do is add a little bit of interactivity, and then we'll also show what the debugging experience is like. So let's go ahead and let's just simply add a stack panel with a button. If you've been following along with my other videos, you know what a stack panel is. Basically, it just stacks, as the name implies, it just stacks whatever your user interface elements, either horizontally or vertically, um, um, so that it's just a way to organize them. And it's pretty handy because it makes it easy for you to quickly organize controls, as you see me doing. So I'm making a little bit of changes. I'm just moving the centering of the UI of the content for the user interface out of the actual text box and putting it at the stack level so that everything is just centered nicely. I'm going to add a little bit of padding across the board. And then I'm going to add another text block which in this case I'm going to name, because I'm going to be doing for this particular exercise. I'm basically just going to create a simple counter so we can see very simple interactivity, right? So txt count, current count. And to start out, obviously this will always be 0. I'm going to center that, and I'm actually going to use the same font size as before. So maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller, and I'll give it a little bit of a margin. Okay. Actually, I'll make it 50. So over here now, I'm gonna just call it increase. And actually for the content, I'm just going to put a plus sign. And of course, I'm going to align it horizontally in the center. And since I have a margin around it, I don't need to worry about that, but I do want to give it a little bit of a width, so that it looks a little bit nicer. And now let's go into the code behind. So basically double click on your main page, and in here, let's wire up some events that allow us to interact with the user interface that we've created. So we're gonna create a number that represents the current count. Of course, that number will be 0 when it starts. And we'll make sure that once it's loaded, whenever it's loaded, it always goes back to 0. So we basically handle the loaded event on the page. Loaded is an event that's triggered in UWP every time that the screen is shown, actually. So it's different than the constructor itself, which would be loaded once. But basically, when you go off screen and come back on screen, if there's any kind of redrawing that happens and reloading of user interface elements, loaded is called, even though the constructor is not called. So in here, we will set the current count back to 0, because we just want it to stay at 0. And then over here, we will just increment the current count each time. And once the current count is implemented, we would then just display what that current count is in the text block that we created for it. So text. And of course, because current count is a number, we're going to have to convert it over to a string, right? And there you have it, right? So this basic code will essentially allow you to click a button, and when you click the button, it just increments a number until you leave the screen. And when you come back on screen, it should start from 0 again. If the screen is reloaded, I should say. So running this on screen, this is basically what we see, which is essentially try to zoom in a bit. There we go. Which is essentially the Hello World application running. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna stop it. I've added a breakpoint here. And actually I'm gonna add the breakpoint here. And then over here, we are going to try to invoke this call, right? So when I now click on the button, as you can see, once the button is clicked on, it goes into the breakpoint, and in the breakpoint, you can see current count is 0. So I'm gonna hit continue, right? And as you can see, it's switching to current count 1. If I click on it again, you can see the breakpoint is hit in my code, in my program. Current count is now 1. It's gonna be switched over to 2, and then it is actually 2 that's gonna be displayed. And then when I let go, 2 is displayed, right? So you can actually go in and add interactivity elements into your Xbox program. I've disabled the breakpoint now, right? Each time you click that, it's going to go up. And while it's running on your Xbox wirelessly, you can actually debug any application, set breakpoints into your code that will actually allow it to stop in your code for you to see what's happening. So let's say something was going wrong. I could go in here and let's say check the value of um of the count at the moment. Actually, take a step back here. Value of the count, and we click on that, and immediately goes in there. And as you can see, the value has gone up by one. The value is not 49, it was 48. Um, and if we actually wanted to see what the current value is of that, we could actually click it. And if we go in here, it will show the current value because this obviously increases it. So it'll show the current value now, which is 49, right? And then when I flip through, it changes to 50.